Okay, welcome back. This is Dino the Ops Guy. This is episode 13 of Production Management and Practice, or essentially Stardew Valley Production 101. Um, so this is basically a YouTube channel where I've taught university, production management, operations management, the like. And I've become a bit disillusioned with what's being taught in business schools, so figured I'd do a bit of it myself, what I feel is the right direction. And I think interaction is very important. I say that. So it's set up to basically I can use Stardew as the factory that I'm taking you to tour, so you can see what happens in a operations environment, in a production environment. So it's not just a textbook, it's actually interacting. Having said that, this is going to be an episode where we're recovering from what's happened. We did in episode 12, we did day 12 and day 13, which was the Egg Festival day, all in one episode. So we've almost completed 2 weeks in Stardew, and I want to do a bit of a strategic review based on what we've done. So we won't actually get into the factory at all today, but apologies for that. I think it's still going to be informative. Hopefully, if it, hopefully you get something out of it. If not, certainly let me know in the comments that you want more actual playtime or some better blend of what's going on. But we're going to get into it, and we're going to start with bottlenecks. So back in day 4, episode 4, we were talking about bottlenecks, and at the time we could see that certainly time of the day was an issue. Certainly how much room we had in our inventory was an issue because we just had the 12. Certainly how much energy that we had and we had to replenish with food was an issue. And we kind of settled on if one of them is going to be the problem, we took an educated guess and said it's probably going to be the energy, the food that we eat. So, and at the time we didn't have a lot of food. Spring onions was about it. We could eat forage items for sure, like leek, like horseradish. We couldn't eat dandelion. We could try, we could eat dandelion. We couldn't eat daffodil. But what we found was, from a trade-off standpoint of how much energy for what we would get if we sold that product, we're better off eating spring onions and the like. So we said energy is going to be the key issue. That's the bottleneck. And at the time, we said we want to assume it is the issue, scrutinize anything that expends energy. So that's while we're watering, make sure we don't miss on waters or don't water too much. And when we're doing fishing and mining, which also takes energy, be careful that we're not biting off more we can chew, kind of thing. And then the second thing is consider increasing energy sources. So take a trip down to the spring onions. Once we got the field snacks, build up some field snacks. Look at seaweed and green kelp when we're fishing. So it tends to take up some more game time, but it certainly helps us from an energy standpoint, which at the time we assumed was a bottleneck. And then beyond that, it was considering upgrading so that we can get essentially more capacity on that. So a better watering can, a better axe, a better pickaxe, a better fishing rod, all that so that we can get more out of the energy that we expend in those operations. And really that comes from the canon or the mantra from Theory of Constraints, and specifically the book The Goal. I brought my copy of The Goal. Whoops, get it on the camera. A really good book. It's a novel. It's not a textbook. It's easy to read. When I've taught operations in the universities, I have assigned that as reading the whole book. It's a really good book. And in it, we discuss bottlenecks and specifically how to address bottlenecks. Rule number 1 is identify the constraint. Rule number 2 was exploit the constraint. Step 3 is subordinate everything else to the constraint. 4 is elevate the constraint or get more capacity. And then 5 is go back to step 1 and make sure that you have the right bottlenecks. So that set of steps is highlighted in the goal as part of Theory of Constraints. And Theory of Constraints really comes around to address the issue of operations and production specifically are non-linear. Things that if you want to get twice as much out, you can't necessarily just double one of the things that you put in. It's not linear that way. It's non-linear. And in those situations, what you find is there are specific constraints, specific resources that are going to hold you back. And they become, if you will, the accelerator. That if you want to go faster, you have to affect those constraints. And they only work to a certain point before you hit the floor of the accelerator. And as well, once you find those, you realize that if you stop those, you stop the flow of money or whatever you're trying to get. All of this is couched in the idea that there is a goal. As much as this book is called The Goal, most people don't come back to that's significant. So when we get to theory of constraints, it works because we have a goal in mind, even if we can't articulate what that goal is. If we don't, and this is the exception, if we don't have a goal in mind, or if there's something to do with the goal that's messed up, this will tend not to work. People will say, oh, the bottleneck always changes. If you have a constant goal, it probably doesn't change all that much. It really stays pretty stable. But in our situation, our goal is essentially to finish the community center. But we're still at the point where we are looking at all the opportunities and saying, which opportunity gets us closer to this? How do we align the inputs to that goal? And we're still figuring that out because it's still pretty early. As we get barns and coops and other things, we're going to find a much more stable connection through, and we will find a better understanding of what that bottleneck is. But because we're so new, and this is typical of startups, you are struggling to find, okay, maybe the goal is this today, maybe it's energy today, maybe it's something else tomorrow, but that comes down to what the goal is. The other exception is it doesn't happen all that often, but I'll find companies where their metrics are absolutely terrible. And the reason they're terrible isn't because they don't have good accounts or they don't have good operations people, whatever. It's because the head of the company wants them to be terrible. And in that sense, the goal isn't something that the company agrees upon. It's something that the head of the company capriciously chooses sort of on an ad hoc basis. So if they had good data, someone in a meeting could say, well, we should do this because the data says this. They don't want that. So they'll typically kind of undermine the data. So it's always a little bit off. And then it comes down to they can pick some data out of the set, whether it's good or bad, to justify what they really want to do. Or even if they can't find some data, anyone who goes against them says, well, this is what I found. They can say, well, we can't really trust that data. We know in the past that it's been bad. So the two situations that this sort of rigor around theory constraints doesn't necessarily work is in sort of that startup growth where we haven't really established any patterns yet, or in situations where the owner is purposely, the management preference is we are going to make decisions regardless of what the data shows us. So we're going to sync the data and make the decisions that we want to make. So other than that, which is the vast majority of production sets, the bottleneck is very important, and these 5 steps are very important. So as it applies to us now, right? So the last few days, we've found that we've had energy at the end of the day. We've had extra things that we could have eaten that we put in inventory, right? So the only thing we're missing at that point is more time. So it is possible that our new energy sources and our watering can really have shifted the situation, right? Not only do we have better sources of food or more sources of food, but now we have carrots, which are a really good source of energy in foods, right? So at this point, we're stuck saying it's probably not the energy. If we go out and we want to chop down trees, which is very energy intensive, I can chop down 3 trees and then have a carrot. And then I can chop down 3 trees and have a carrot. And at the end of the day, the question becomes, do I run out of carrots or do I run out of time? And typically we're finding in situations like that, we are running out of time, not carrots. So if that's the case, we're going to change things with our steps approach and assume in this case, time in the day is the bottleneck, and scrutinize anything that expends time, not energy. So for example, long walking distance uses a lot of time, even if it doesn't use any energy, but that time is now the more valuable thing, right? So if we look at spring onions, that made a lot of sense before because time wasn't the bottleneck, but energy was. So if we spend a lot of time, an hour, whatever it is, to get to the bottom of the spring onions, we've essentially wasted none of the energy to get there and got all kinds of energy when we got there. Now we're going to flip that around. Now we're going to say in that trade-off, we don't want to lose time getting there to get the energy that we really don't need. We want to essentially use more energy so that we have more time. Or essentially, let's not waste time just to get energy, right? So first thing, as far as walking distance, the second thing we're going to essentially say, if we have to make a trade-off, the trade-off is going to be in favor of time, not in energy. And the third thing is going to say, how can we basically elevate it? How can we make it so that we get more time? And in some cases, that means upgrading the walkways that we have. In some cases, it means getting mine carts, or at some point, we'll have totems that'll help us with teleportation. Those type of things are going to matter more, because now the bottleneck, at least as we assume it, and I'm pretty sure it's going to hold, is going to be the time. So if we challenge this, it makes us more energy. We can always revisit the change. So if we find that we do a couple days of focusing on time and then we run out of energy, then we know we can go back to energy. If we focus on time and we run out of storage space and inventory, then maybe that's a new bottleneck. Or maybe there's another bottleneck that we haven't come up with. But the resource that we're going to focus on now is going to be time. Okay, so let's talk about strategy. We have made a lot of progress on our strategy of getting the community center filled up. And some of the things that we've done, basically, we've got our 20 strawberry plants, which is going to give us a really good income for a lot of the money things that we have to spend, or the G things that we have to spend going forward. Right? We have a copper watering can, so we can certainly grow more. So whether it's this season or other seasons, we can feel a lot more comfortable how we're going to fill the crop bundles. And we have 5 gold parsnips, so the quality crop bundle will extend potentially through fall. And we've already made a good headway on that one with our 5 gold parsnips, and it's only been in the first 2 weeks. So we're actually really doing well. What you'll find is the first half, we've really been focusing on crops and getting money out of those crops so that we can develop sort of the next steps. For the second half of spring, we're going to shift that to basically where we can do resource acquisition and take advantage of some of the multipliers. So we will continue to capitalize on crops, but more through using preserve jars, which will take essentially 175G up to a 262G piece of cauliflower and going to convert it to a 400G preserve. That's a really good thing. We could essentially, depending on what level of farming we are, that could essentially double our output from cauliflower. We will also require a lot of wood, coal, ore, stones, that sort of thing, because we're going to be getting into more coops and more barns and more silo, well, one silo at least, and other things that we'll need, the ores to upgrade our tools. So all of that is going to come, and from a strategic level, we're moving out of sort of a crop focus and into more of a resource focus piece of it, right? Specifically for reserve jars, as I said, there's a potential for doubling our money. It's a really good return. What we need is coal and wood. We have 21 coal. We have 2 cauliflower. We can feed it even on the first day if we can make 2 of them. So the next thing to do is, if we can start getting our wood and match it with the copper, and I think we need stones on that as well. We have some stones, and start making those. We can start getting that cash register making money right away. When we look at plots, essentially we have our strawberries in, we fertilize them, so they're going to run a little faster. So instead of ST7s, which they'd normally take, it's going to be faster. So that's why those are in red. We have a whole bunch of open space, and I've numbered some of those spaces close to the water and close to the house or the cabin, whatever the case. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And really what I'd like to do is fill as many of those with cauliflower as I could, both because they're a really good return in their own right, but also because they're a much bigger return once we put them through the preserve jars, and potentially it'll give us opportunities to buy even more preserve jars. So there's some of the acceleration. The problem is they take 12 days to grow, so there's only a few more days we can plant them and actually expect them to be done by the end of the season. So I've identified those 40, and we're going to do what we can to fill those up right away. That's going to be our first priority, just because there's a time sensitive piece on that. And we have 1389, almost $1,400, 1400G in inventory. We also have amethyst, diamond, topaz, which we could donate to Gunther, but we're not going to do that. We are actually going to sell those. We will wait for the next amethyst and the next diamond and the next topaz to give them to Gunther. But we're going to take advantage of that right now, and that should afford us 28 cauliflower seeds. So that's one in that little one spot on its own, and then the rest we will group for groups of 3x3 to get the potential. It's not a high probability, but the potential of getting the supersize cauliflower. And again, that's limited. There's only so much time, so as many of those that we can get would be great. And then we will carry on to other things like getting wood for the preserves, etc. If we're looking at fishing, catfish are only available on rainy days, so let's take advantage of that. We still need a bullhead from the mountain lake, but at the end of the day, these are not going to be a priority because either of those can be found later on in other seasons. So let's not focus too much on that. However, what we have noticed is that the most lucrative we can do, the most money we can make really is fishing at those little ring things. So we're going to have a fishing rod on standby. If we see one of those and it works our schedule, we're just going to dive in and get as much as we can out of that. And if we happen to get a bullhead or a bream or a sunfish, I guess sunfish I should have put in there as well. We need a sunfish this season. But again, it's fairly easy to get because it's pretty much any sunny-ish day in spring. So mining, well, if we get lucky days, that helps us descend the mine faster. We find those ladders much faster, so that's good. On any floor, before we leave the floor, if we see any ores, we want to grab those ores. And as well, until we get our monster eradication goal for insects, in which case we will get that crazy looking bughead weapon sword thing. Then we want to keep going to get those 80. So if we see certainly the easy flying bugs, we can take those. If we see the larvae, we can pretty much pick them out pretty quickly with either the club or whatever next weapon we have. We're at a good level there. Even the flying attacky ones, we do a pretty good job on. So let's get those to 80. And then once we get that weapon, it's a level 6 weapon. So that's going to be very, very effective when we're in the mines. Foraging, well, if we get a leek, it'll match up with the rest of the stuff we have. We have extra dandelion and extra horseradish and extra daffodils. So that's very lucrative if we get leek. But the rest of them, we get some money, but not the same return that we would. So just spending a lot of time walking just to do foraging doesn't help us as much anymore because time is so valuable. Ocean foraging is still lucrative, especially around the pools. Otherwise, we're just not going to do the trade-offs. Going down to get spring onions probably is not in our purview unless we're already down there for something else. Making special trips for spring onions just doesn't cut it anymore if the time in the day is going to be the issue. An upgrade of the copper axe is very important because the other part of foraging is getting wood, and we're going to need just a ton of that. So come Wednesday, after we've decided we can't plant any more cauliflower, that is going to be a big goal of ours, if you will. So let's talk about the bundles. In the first set, we were looking at farming bundles. What we're going to find the second half of spring is we're going to focus on resource bundles. So certainly the construction bundle, which is wood, stone, and hardwood. We already have one hardwood, but we're probably going to get a few more of those. Once we get 10, we pretty much have the rest. We can finish that. The blacksmith bundle also goes well. Only from the standpoint that we need to get iron and gold. We can cheat that one a bit by buying gold ore from Clint. It is a bit more expensive, but there's no sense in it unless the other bundles have been complete. The geologist bundle is going to be the one that's probably going to slow us down because it needs the fire quartz as well as the frozen tier. So the frozen tier is in sort of the 40 to 60, 70 range floors. And then the fire quartz is 80, the 80th floor and up. If we're lucky to get them in a geode earlier, great, then we can accelerate things. But otherwise, it's just a matter of getting farther down in the mine. And then, of course, the Adventurers bundle. We do have, once we start getting into the dark levels, Batwings are going to come pretty quickly. I don't think we have enough slime to make it, and usually we don't even bother with that. We just wait till we get up to something that'll give us a solar essence, and usually 10 Batwings and a solar essence are what's going to get us through that. So that's what's up for the bundles. Let's look at what we know from the past as far as ledger. We've gained 5173 in farming, so that is discounting how much we're buying. But crediting back how much we have in the field. So I basically said, yes, we spend 7,000 on seeds, but 3,000 of that is still in the field, so we can take the net of that. And from that investment, we have the harvest of 8,000. Plus, we've used some of those in... maybe this should have been in foraging, but we'll craft to make spring seeds for another 1,200. So that gives us a net of just over 5,000. Once we get to foraging, it's just straight chopping wood and stuff is 7,600. Mining, there's from battling and from mining itself, there's about 4,000, plus we gain when we take those ores and smelt them, and when we process those geodes. So net effect, we're about 5,000 there. Fishing, we spent 6 on bait, and that gives us the 135 we caught, but as well, just pulling fish out of the water on our pole is 1956, so it's about 2,000 there. In all of those, we've eaten about 1,000 worth of energy, whether it's spring onions at 717, or even I guess it wouldn't be anything for field snacks, because field snacks have no value there. But the blending to make the field snacks was 190, so or thereabouts. Strategically, we are investing, so donating items for almost 500. Building stuff, that's the paths that we're building, that's the chests that we're building, those types of things is 5,000. We've gifted for 8, and bundled things that we've put in the bundles is just about 500. So that covers pretty much everything that we're looking for. So strategically, we have invested essentially 6,000, and that's going to pay off as we move forward. So what we can look at for the next week, I know it's not quite Sunday yet, but let's say for the next Sunday to Sunday, by the 21st, we will have harvested 20 strawberries. That'll be our first harvest. And that's going to give us essentially 240 G plus, meaning if they're silver or gold, it's going to be more than that. There's also a chance for strawberries that instead of getting just 1 strawberry from a plant, you will get 2. So that could even go higher. We have 24 cauliflower that we'll harvest in that time for 175 G. That will be good value added for that, but we'll probably expend on that, like build on that when we use the preserve jars. We have some unmilled rice. Maybe the crows will get to a couple of them. We don't know. But essentially, of the 6 plants, we're expecting 9 unmilled rice from them at 30 G. It's not a lot, but that's an extra 270. We can also expect another 600, just based on how we've been doing on foraging around the tide pools. Based on the number of lucky days, we're expecting, in the past, we've sort of run 2,000 G per week in the mines. So that basically sets us up for, we are looking to potentially get 10,000 G just on those 4 things that we're looking at: farming, fishing, mining, and foraging. So that's what we're set up for. We are not going to give Av anything to do. That's sort of what we had in mind for today. Again, this is in the context of what has gone on up in the first 13 episodes. If you haven't seen those, feel free to go back. They should be on YouTube, available for anyone. But that'll catch us up to say tomorrow on the 14th day, 14th episode, we are going to get into how do we do this transition from sort of a crops-based economy to a resource-based economy, and how we build strategically into finishing all the community center stuff, and along the way learn all these production operations principles. So this is Dino, the ops guy, signing off.